right, Buffacorns. Next up, I'm excited to introduce Nicholas from Tellor. He's going to be coming to us today talking about community currencies and the need for more altcoins. Nicholas, how's your day been?
Hey, it's been good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're super excited to hear today. So I'm just going to give you the floor and let you jump in.
Cool. Yeah, no, excited to get started.
Fine.
Okay. All right. Can you guys hear me okay? And then how does the presentation look? Good?
Looking sound good.
Cool. Awesome. So as they said, my name is Nick Fett. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about community currencies. Namely, you know, it's super interesting following that last talk. He was talking about why different ledgers are needed. And I'm going to be talking about why different currencies are needed and why different tokens are needed and how it can actually be just a super cool thing to get the whole space started. Obviously, I'm also going to go over kind of what these might look like on Ethereum and what we're doing about it. First, so kind of why I'm talking about this. I'm an economist by training, but I also I'm the CTO at Tellor. Tellor is a decentralized oracle on top of Ethereum. So if you need off-chain data in your smart contracts, you can use Tellor. We have a bunch of bounties up. We have a booth in the castle, so come over and visit us, or go hack on us. But that's actually not why I'm here today. We actually just launched a new product, which is called Chorus, and Chorus is our protocol for community currencies. Namely, what we do is we create stablecoins that have flexible monetary policies, and I'll kind of get into what that entails, but mainly I'm going to try and keep it much more broad and talk to you guys a little bit about just kind of community currencies, competing currencies, and why these are a good thing, and how the space in Ethereum and kind of the broader crypto space can really just utilize these to start growing. Okay, so what's the purpose of different currencies? Like, why do we want to do it? You know, obviously we're making some money. If you guys get it, it's a joke. We're making money, but you know, we want the idea that you can have a money that's not run by a state. So whenever I talk about state-backed currencies, these are US dollar, euro, Japanese yen. People with militaries have currencies, but things like Bitcoin, things like TRB, which is Tellor's token, these smaller currencies, which, you know, these are things that aren't backed by these states. And the other purpose, you know, this talk kind of in general, what you should really think about it as is how do we get cryptos to compete again as a currency? You know, Bitcoin once used to be used to buy pizzas. How do we kind of get back to that and compete with the US dollar as a currency? You know, creating a stock on chain or a bond is cool, but having currencies is something that's really powerful. And how do we sort of get back to that? And the main tool I'm going to talk about is just the use of flexible monetary policies, namely using inflation. So whenever I talk about monetary policies, it's just kind of how your cryptocurrency or how your currency is set up, what that sort of incentivizes, and how you can use actually inflation and printing money to help your community, namely gain network effects and incentivize certain things versus other things. So to talk about kind of the history of having more than one currency, it's super interesting actually, because both the left and the right, you know, U.S. political spectrum here, have been pushing for non-US dollar. So the right calls these competing currencies. So what you'll have is, you know, this has been coming up for a long time. The libertarian wings have argued that the US government shouldn't control the money supply. It's just a bad way to go, because you should allow competing currencies, because they believe that there's way too much inflation. What we need to do is actually just enable anyone to have their own currencies, because what's going to win out is obviously gold and silver and hard metals. So that's why we need competing currencies. And then on the left, you have this other thing called community currencies. And this comes from the belief that so corporations and governments have who run kind of the currency, and the banks, they're not incentivizing the right things. So we need to create, say, local currencies that we can have, say a Denver currency to promote local sustainability, and we can promote our goals rather than the goals of these giant interests who control it. Both are kind of pushing for the same change in law that we would need, allow competing in more than just the US dollar. Well, this is where crypto comes in. We can actually now do this. And so you're like, okay, well, the right and the left both like it. Why isn't this a thing? So there is a debate about whether or not you want multiple currencies. So if most people would probably recognize, it used to be a debate back in the day, was whether or not we're going to have more than one altcoin, whether it's Bitcoin's going to be the only crypto, or whether there are going to be more than just Bitcoin. And I think we're beyond the stage. I think we can actually say that we're going to have more than just Bitcoin now. But even just in the real world, the argument would go that, well, we should have one global currency. If you have one global currency, there's a whole lot of efficiency gains. Like, every single person on the planet can, use the exact same currency. You're not gonna have the petrodollar system where the U.S. gains a whole bunch of just purchasing power due to the fact that they have a strong dollar. It'll sort of be more equal, and everything will be Hakuna Matata. The other argument, or kind of the problem with that, I would say, would just be that you lose a lot whenever you're not sort of using money properly. And I'm going to kind of talk about ways that you can use money to lead to things, but the idea of monetary sovereignty. Monetary sovereignty is whenever you have the ability to print money. So probably people who are watching this who are over in Europe probably know a whole lot about monetary sovereignty, because whenever you join the EU, you give up monetary sovereignty. You now no longer have the ability to just print your currency at will. And there's some good things and there's some bad things about this. So, if you have the ability to print money, namely, we've sort of had a really hard time this past year with the pandemic. It would be cool if you could print money to pay people to stay at home. Might be a valid reason to print money, and everyone could get on board with it. If you don't have monetary sovereignty, you can't do that. You need the central bank somewhere else to do it. So, if your country is all for printing money, but other people are more stingy, you're not going to get some money printed. But there's also bad. We all know, one of the big reasons, like, the libertarian wings wanted to start crypto was that inflation is used in a lot of ways to kind of just for private profit. So it goes to a few people and not towards others. And the historical reason for inflation is war. You want to go attack some other country. If you didn't have the ability to print money for it, what you would actually have to do is go tax your citizens, which, nobody's really going to want their taxes raised, so you can go attack some other country. But if you can just print money, it leads to your ability to go fight a bunch of wars overseas and sort of have these perpetual wars. And so that's a bad thing. I think there's just a few pieces here about maybe we can actually start using some of the competing currencies ideas to where we don't support those currencies that we don't like. But so that kind of gets into the idea, well, do we want flexible money? Isn't fiat already flexible? And yes, it is. But you can think of community currencies and monetary policy in two senses. So there's inflation, which we're going to talk about, and what you can use those inflations for. But it's also how it's structured actually has an impact on the way that your society functions. So the classic tale from community currency advocates is the tale of the 11 rounds. So I'll tell this story quick. It's there's a traveler, and he's sailing from island to island, and he lands on this one island, and there's a group of people who's never seen the outside world for thousands and thousands of years. They're still on the barter system. So one person uses chickens, another person he pays chickens for bread, for coconuts, for fish, and there's no money, and it's super inefficient. And the traveler's like, this just has to go. So he goes to the people. Let's, what we're going to say for easy math, there's 10 people, and he says, hey, listen, guys, this isn't the right way to do it. I'm going to give you each 10 rounds. So I'm going to give you each 10 coins, and you guys are going to use these as money, and it's going to be great. And they're like, cool, this makes sense. We see how this could work. And he says, hey, but since I'm giving you this phenomenal innovation, what you're actually going to have to do is you're going to have to give me some interest. So I'm going to give you each 10 rounds, but you got to pay me back 11 at the end of the year. And they say, okay, and they start going, and there's some gains, but hopefully you can see the problem with it. So if there's 10 people and he gave each of them 10 rounds, that's 100 rounds, but they each have to pay back 11. That means they would have to pay back a total of 110 rounds, which doesn't exist. So what gives? And what it actually leads to is this is a debt-based money system. This is what we have, and it leads to competition. Namely, the one way that everybody could pay it back is, well, if one person goes out of business, now you can pay it all back. So now you've basically baked in competition because you're trying to pay this back, and that's might not be what you want to go to. The other way that you can do it, you can have growth. This is why in most modern economies, you always have to have growth, whether you inflate your way to growth or not, because the money system doesn't handle shrinking well. Because if you, let's say you bring 20 more people onto your island and they each take out loans for 10, now those people can pay it back. And this is kind of the situation we're in, is you have a money system that incentivizes just constant growth and constant competition, and you feel it. That's what you feel kind of in the current economy, and that you might want something different. So the next piece, if you have how it's structured, that's really important, and how you structure your currencies. But the next big piece about monetary policy is inflation. Note, whenever I talk about inflation, there's kind of two pieces about the definition, and everyone in the crypto space just uses them interchangeably, and you'll probably catch me doing it. But inflation is actually how much the price level increases. This is different than the supply growth rate of money, so how much the money supply is growing. So for those who have been following the print your go burr memes and the Federal Reserve, even during the 2008 pandemic, they doubled the money supply. But as far as you guys know, the price level did not double. And the reason is that you can print a whole lot of money, and if it just goes and sits in somebody's bank account, you don't get any inflation. It can also go sit in somebody's bank account who invested in the stock market, and the stock market goes up, but you don't really get any inflation. So the two are correlated, but you generally don't. They're not one-on-one. And a lot of people may have heard the term deflationary currency, so like Bitcoin as a deflationary currency. So if you have a fixed supply, 21 million, and demand is rising, what actually happens is the price of your currency goes up, which means the price level of everything else goes down. This is actually bad for a currency. Maybe some really hardcore libertarians might disagree, but the general idea that price levels fall, it has some consequences to it. Namely, if you know that your money or your Bitcoin is going to go up in value, you don't want to spend it as a currency. It's really easy to see that. And if you just want to hold, and that's fine, but it's not a currency. You're not sort of spurring the economy by spending it if everyone just wants to hoard these things for themselves. So that's one big issue. The other one is that certain prices don't fall. So this is, Keynes had his famous sticky wage theory, and it's basically that if, some things come down in price, like say the prices of TVs or something, those you can lower in price pretty easily, but it's really hard to lower somebody's wages. It's also really hard for people to accept things like their house going down in value. So there are reasons you may not want prices to fall. The other piece of inflation, you should also, whenever I say the term inflation, you should think of inflation as a tax. Inflation is a tax on holders. So if you want if Bitcoin's kind of the classic example that I'll keep going back to because I think everyone sort of understands how it works. Bitcoin does have inflation. The inflation is the mining reward. So you have, there's two kind of ways to pay for security in Bitcoin. You can either have fees, sure. So you have people who are doing these transactions, they would pay fees on it. Okay, that would work. But if people, why are you using Bitcoin? Well, it's actually not, the current narrative is that it's not supposed to be for transactions. So why are you punishing these people? It's supposed to be a store of value. So who should be paying for the security? Well, the people who are using it as a store of value should be paying for it. And that's the people who are just holding it. So how do you tax the people who are just holding it? And you print money. It's kind of an equal tax on everyone who's holding it, and that's how you do it. So if you can use inflation you basically punish or tax holders, and then you give it towards something else. And that's what I want you to think of whenever you're, how can we sort of design community currencies using monetary policy so we can take advantage of the tools of, say, countries to use inflation and then also put it somewhere. So what Bitcoin does is it puts it towards security. This is in the form of mining reward. But what you can also do is you can use these monetary policies for other things. So you can think you can print money and you can put it towards a dev share. So that's actually what Tellor does. Our whole team, we didn't print any tokens at the beginning. We just give ourselves inflationary rewards, and that's what we pay for it. Other things you can do, so usage. This is like what yield farming is. Basically, if you're using our protocol, we're going to print money to get you to use it. And this is really powerful because in the past, if you wanted people to use your protocol right at the beginning, what you would have to do is you would actually have to have money. So you would need some VC to give you money, and then you would have to actually pay them. That's really hard to get a bunch of money up front. But now what you can do is you can have this system where if people think it's going to be used in the future, you can print money and pay them with it. And this is how you bootstrap usage. And all of these things, this is how you bootstrap it. So Bitcoin, how do you bootstrap security in Bitcoin? How do you get people to start mining and doing these things? And how you do it is you print money. Bitcoin's inflation rate right at the beginning was absurd. And that's a good thing. It obviously worked out for him. And lastly, maybe you do have something. How do you incentivize people for just holding it? You give them staking rewards. So you just pay people for holding it. And you can do these things with inflation. You don't have to, it just ruins kind of the whole people's mindset. So, same with like development. So it's really hard to get people to pay for open source development, saying like, just donate here. Nobody does that. It's much easier if you just say like, hey, if we get usage on this thing, your token's going to go up in value. But by the way, we're also printing these tokens to pay for development. People are okay with that. It just has a better feel. And so this is other sort of problems and how we can kind of go after it. If one big problem in cryptocurrency is the idea that you have too many free riders. So sometimes these tokens will get a bunch of people who just buy the token and they sit there. Nobody does anything. There's no development. The developer fund is gone. It's time for a custom monetary policy where you have more inflation, and if you're not actually doing something, you sort of get weeded out. Another thing, too much activity. So I think you could argue like on Ethereum right now, you could drastically lower the inflation rates because if there's so much security, like I think some people have made the argument that Bitcoin and some of these other proof of work coins are actually way more secure than they need to be. You should be lowering the inflation rate. And the last one, kind of a poor community, or if there's different pieces you don't like, or as a community you don't like, you can structure inflation into those that you do like. So, if you look at some communities that say are too many free riders, or they're sometimes, I know Ethereum did a good job with this, with kind of the difficulty bombs and making sure that your miners don't control your network completely, but you can have inflation to sort of weed them out. These are some things that you can do, and not saying you should. But yeah, so these are some things that you should do whenever designing kind of your own custom currency. I know I'm running short on time, so I'm just going to kind of fly through the next few. So why not Bitcoins currently? You know, we want more of them. We want more things with flexible monetary policies. I put stability and store value. So Chorus, it creates these semi-stable coins. So you would actually back it with Bitcoin, and then you could have a monetary policy on top of it. You want more pieces with flexible monetary policies, because if the more communities you have doing their own flexible thing, the more network effects you create, the more chances you have to create something new. And that's really what we want to get at here. And the last thing, why not kind of just stable coins? You know, like, yes, you could use DAI as a currency, or yes, you could use some of these other stable coins, USDC, but there's no monetary sovereignty. So if you're like, what are you trying to create? You know, just use the dollar. If you're trying to do a currency, you want the community, you want the currency that you're using to fit your values. You want it to fit what you're trying to create and fit your community and have the inflation going towards your community. And that's whenever you kind of create something good. So anyway, I have a few examples here. Kind of the one I'd like to touch on is just, you know, if you're an early stage startup and you need to subsidize usage, you can create, you know, what Chorus allows you to do is it allows you to create a fixed supply governance token, but you then can lock it into a contract and have a currency that's easy to spend and cheap to spend. And then the inflation actually can go back to your users, so you can bootstrap usage. And I think that's one of the more powerful things here. So anyway, maybe I got time for a question, but I know I got on early, so I can hop off. Thanks everyone for listening. Go to chorus.tellor.io. Learn some more.
Thanks, Nicholas. That was awesome and full of some fun, controversial ideas. People in this space often don't want to hear about taxing and whether or not we should be creating our money. So thanks for mixing it up a little bit. Sometimes I think we really need to talk about that stuff rather than avoiding the ideas.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun, and I'll see you guys in the castle.